Okay, well, I thought I'd just kind of give you a quick overview and then take questions. I've got an idea of at least what one or two of the questions would be, but, and I want to thank you all for inviting me here. This measure and others that we put on the ballot were charter amendments, changing the charter to more conform with a constitution. The charters are kind of considered the constitution of a city. One of the things that, and I'm going to bring up Ask Damascus only because as a group, we could see that and it was generally agreed that if you look at this, the federal constitution or the state constitution, they have certain rights that they give. And those rights are based, even in the state constitution, the first paragraph is about the rights of the people. What we noticed in the city charter is that there were rights granted the city, but there was no Bill of Rights for the people. That is why we started writing these amendments. Now, when we wrote the spending limit, the purpose was actually right in the first sentence, to control the growth of spending by the city, the total spending. And spending authorized by a vote of the people is permitted. If they authorize something, whatever it might be, they can do that. So there really aren't limits within the measure on what the city can do. It strictly is giving the people the right to say yay or nay. But something that also needs to be looked at is the sister amendment to the spending limit. And that was passed in March of 2008. And it required a vote on new or increased taxes. Now, when that was the driving force behind that at the time, something you heard throughout the city was taxes are going up like mad, what am I getting for it? Now, of all things, the thing that kind of pushed it over the edge happened to be a pretty small thing, and it happened to be the Verizon franchise fee. And the reason that was kind of a flashpoint was that at that time, the city council met and this Verizon fee was proposed. It's a franchise fee, it's on all utilities, and it basically just raises everybody's rates, and the city takes a cut off of your utility bill. But what happened was in one meeting on January 9th of '06, the city council introduced this franchise fee. Now, they're supposed to have a couple of hearings and then pass it. Well, what they did is they had a hearing. Nobody was there to testify, no citizen. They stopped the hearing, ended it, and then introduced it for the second hearing. There was no one there to complain about it, so they stopped that and then introduced it for passage and implementation. Now, the whole thing was proposed and enacted in about 40 seconds. And nobody was here to say anything. That was when Ask Damascus, looking at that, and it wasn't just that one that was worded that way, but that was the one we looked at and said, wait a minute, people have to have a say in taxation. So we passed that amendment. Now, the problem with that came under state law. We could not pass a spending limit at that point. Now, the reason that we wanted to look at a spending limit was that in Oregon, government has an accounting mechanism that's quite well accepted. The city and most governments have to have a balanced budget. However, they can use debt to balance it. Therefore, controlling taxes didn't fully address the situation. So we put in a spending limit to prevent the city from racking up a bunch of debt and obligating people and continuing to spend. So we put the spending limit in to prevent that. I think that's pretty much it, except that the other thing that entered into this was the spending limit and no new taxes without a vote. Could have been one measure, except that the state looks at it as one is taxation, one is spending, one's income, one's outgo. You can't have them both in the same measure. So that's why there were two measures. And with that, that's kind of the overview. If you have any questions.
I have a couple right out of the gate.
Okay.
So franchise fees, that's what sparked everything. The fact that nobody came and said their piece 2 meetings in a row, and that
No, it
wasn't.
happened at one meeting. I think that's
At
what
all?
sparked it.
They called it twice during the meeting.
They called it twice and then approved it.
And then approved
So they
it.
did 3 actions in that meeting.
Okay. And that didn't seem, now, correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but to the folks that penned this, that didn't seem substantial enough as a citizen comment.
Well, it appeared they were breaking the law, actually.
To enact
The-
franchise fees?
No,
But
no,
nothing to
but
do with- Oh, I see.
the idea that the law has it, the reason you have it introduced numerous times is to allow public input.
Okay.
The way this was done, and to be honest, with the city council at that time, it very well could have been poor advice from the attorney. Everybody was new at this, but to pass taxes that way was, even Jim Wright, after a while, admitted that's not right.
So it was a procedural, an objection to procedure more than it was to the franchise fees. But I have a question about franchise fees in particular. All the utilities, or not all the utilities, many utilities are still collecting franchise fees. And, they're racking them up and we don't get the money. Do you have any objection to us changing the verbiage somehow that we can collect the franchise fees from the utilities so that, that's our money?
Here's what I would suggest, and why it wasn't done, I don't know, but I would object to that. Let me tell you why, but I see where you're coming from, and I think there's a better way to do it. And that is, we can't collect franchise fees. That's the only thing that's limited. The city still can give out franchises. That was not by accident, but by design. In Gresham,
But the state still collects it.
pardon?
The state still.
It depends on which one it is. The ones under the Citizen Utility Board, there's a certain amount of the franchise fee that's built into their basic rates. Now, for telephone, which is different than for electric, I can't remember the exact numbers you made, there's a certain amount they collect. If you go over that, the limit that because there's state limits on what franchise fees can be. If you go over that, then the whole thing shows up on your bill. But your bill went down about 2/3 of that, which they were already collecting to begin with.
So it's already collected today.
It's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So let me clarify. So the city coming after franchise fees would be in addition to the existing.
No,
It would be above and beyond the existing.
no, we would be collecting the franchise fees that they are already collecting. They just can't pay us because we can't collect franchise fees according to our.
Well, I'm talking
our
about
charter.
if we were functioning as a functional city, we would collect those,
Right,
right? But we can't.
right.
But it's not in
Mhm.
addition to. It's, you're not getting your portion of the pie. The pie is being paid by the customers right now, but the city can't get their piece of the pie. We're paying it.
Someone do.
Yeah, it's
Right.
on everybody's bill.
I am
Right.
aware of that. I work for the company that seizes it.
Uh-oh. Well, if I may, what the city can do is change the franchise. If you have the Gresham charging, you got a base rate of whatever on a phone or electric. In this case, actually, let's take Verizon. I think that was 7%. Okay, Verizon at the time, I called because I needed high-speed internet service. I couldn't get it, they didn't have plans for it in this area. As soon as this measure passed, they were making substantially more money, and Damascus became a priority because they knew they could make 7% more here than anywhere else because they aren't paying the franchise fee. Now, why the city council didn't say, wait a minute, if they are collecting the franchise fee
That goes to the state.
and we are not, no, the utility keeps it, in this case,
Yes.
In the phone case?
yes. Well, yeah, let's concentrate just on the phones
I think
for
right now, they've got built into the rate a 5% assumed franchise fee rate. And since we're not collecting it, they get to keep it.
So why not tell the phone company, in order to get a franchise here, drop your rate 5%? That is something you could do. It doesn't cost the
No, that's-
city anything.
That is not something we
It's a
can
tariff,
do.
it's a tariff product. It can't happen.
Citizens
It's built into the base rate, take it out.
But
It
citizens,
it can't
they
happen
can't.
per Congress. You can't lower that rate. It's a tariff product nationwide.
It's
Is there
set by the
another
Citizen
solution?
Utility Board. We don't have jurisdiction.
Okay, let me just go to that here.
I suggest another solution.
We'll open it up for public comment at the end, I think, if we have time.
Thanks.
Let's make
The, I'm trying to go to the,
Section 45, oh, no, I'm sorry.
okay, so this was, franchise fee of 7% of gross revenue collected within the city. Now, that's not true. It is not a tariff. This says the city can levy that.
You can't lower rates. It's a tariff product, so it means the price is fixed. The price of copper is fixed. It cannot lower. You can't do that. It's impossible. I can't do that. Jesus can't do that. It doesn't happen.
Okay, let's assume that's right. 4% is within a base rate.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
So 3% can be lowered. Some of it can be lowered.
I think, in a sense, I think,
Are you talking about the franchise portion of it? Or are you
The
talking?
franchise fee,
I
that's
think,
the
Rate.
city tax.
I think what he's referring to, there's a 4, yeah, I thought it was 5, but probably 4% is already built into the franchise fee. The state is set at a limit of 7. Since the city decided to go to 7, the 3% gets added to the bill. So when this passed, the bill went down 3%. Does that match your memory?
Because the
I
city portion is not.
don't
collected.
recall it going down, but I'm not positive.
It's, you know, on a
So-
$40
so-
bill, it's,
so
you know.
we do get our piece of the pie above and beyond the state mandate. Yes. So your proposal is to, correct me if I'm wrong, have the state drop the 4%, lower the 4%, or?
No, that's still the city's portion.
Could we move back to the spending limit?
Yeah, I was
You're
gonna
right,
say.
you're right.
Okay.
This,
So the reason why we're touching on this is it seems to be the backbone of where the spending limit came from, and that's, I think, why we're harping
Well-
on it. Then you move to the debt funding, which the city, to my knowledge, from what I looked at, I went back, I think, 5 years on public budgets, and we've not been in debt, nor have we debt funded
Right.
to date. So
Mhm.
that to me seems like a bit of a straw man out of fear, you know.
It is kind of, most cities are in debt. We're very unique that way. But one of the concerns I have, and Chris should know, if you disincorporate a city, this actually gives the people the right to disincorporate. I'm not a fan of that, but the fact of the matter is, the law says that no city that has debts or obligations, no government can be dissolved. And therefore, and if the people are really gonna control this, we need to keep debt out of it. I've been in numerous meetings where the first thing a government does is go for debt because that makes them eternal life.
But
I wouldn't say that was the motivation. You know, I've never seen a discussion of debt for the purpose of, oh, we got this threat to our existence. No, it's usually, we need to build a road, we got development that's come in, we've got industry that wants to locate, and we need to, you know, do
For
this
whatever
type of-
reason.
well, for whatever reason. But wouldn't it have been better to actually write something that directly goes after debt? Because other jurisdictions have that in their charter to restrict the ability of debt for the very reasons you're talking about.
Well, this had other reasons too, that was one.
So going back to what Randy touched on, perhaps writing within this, a vote of the people if debt funding is needed. Would that suffice?
It's already in there. They can break the spending limit,
Well,
just give it to the people to vote on.
well, essentially, we can collect it. We can collect all we want.
You can collect what? I
Taxes. We just can't spend it.
Right, but then there is a tax limitation.
I understand. But
Okay.
if we go to a vote and we request debt funding,
Mm-hmm.
right? Vote of the people, they voted to debt fund something.
Right.
Then we have to go to a vote to spend that
No,
debt.
Actually, the way this is written, if you look at C1 under there, if we have a vote to approve bonds, you know, we can spend that money. What we could not spend, you know, there's two types of bonds. There's bonds that are approved and added to the tax base, and then there's also general obligation bonds that go against your existing revenue. So we could not do a general obligation bond, but we could have a vote to approve a bond to build some road or whatever we decide we wanted to build.
But wouldn't that fall within the spending limit still? We would
No,
vote
because
to
if you look
collect
at,
it.
if you look at
It's an
C1, it
exemption.
excludes it. proceeds from sales of bonds specifically approved by voters. So that part is in there.
Okay. So I was looking for a change, so. Okay. So your fear was debt.
That was one.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
So can I bring up a new topic? Sure. So one of the problems I see with the spending limit is, each year it encourages staff to spend 100% of their budget. So if they only spend 70% of their budget because they did something cheaper than they thought they could, next year they get rewarded with a lower spending limit. So over time, the spending limit will really hamper a city, especially a growing city. If the city does grow, the money they can spend every year is not going to increase to keep up with population growth or even inflation sometimes.
Yeah, I actually had that very same question, and I was wondering if, you know, it could be as simple as changing one word. From one year to the next shall be no greater than the previous year's expenditures, could be changed to no greater than other previous year's expenditures. And then we don't have staff trying to spend as much money as they can at the end of the year, trying to, you know, bump up against that spending limit. If we had it so that it wasn't just the previous year, then we could remain at that same spending limit.
Well, I guess I don't understand. Now, you're concerned about the staff spending 100% of what they
Not the
have.
staff,
Let
the
me give you an
administration.
example. You have a budget
Okay.
that's built to be within your spending limit. Most years, a city tries to come in somewhere under that budget, because if they go 1 penny over, they just broke the law. Is that a correct statement? You know, because that's not authorized to be spent. Since we have a spending limit, it'd be not only a violation of our charter, it'd also be a violation of the county rules that the cities and governments have to follow. So spending every year to year comes in a little bit under. If it comes in 2.5% under, the next year's spending limit is the same as the one previous year. So there is no indexing due to doing the fiscally responsible thing of not spending every penny. And so if the word expenditures was changed from the previous year's expenditures to the previous year's spending limit, the spending limit would go up every year without the city being penalized if it does what it should do and not spend every penny. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but what you're really saying is you kind of fear the limit. You'll be limited on the growth, so let's let everything grow so that we don't hit that limit.
Actually, what we see is a declining spending limit because of the way this is written. The spending limit's not going up, the spending limit's going down.
You're right, if they don't spend this.
Yeah.
Okay, now, I have just the budget committee. It shouldn't be staff deciding how much is spent in whatever it is.
I'm sorry, that was a misnomer.
Oh,
I should have
okay.
said the administration in general, I didn't mean to say.
You're forgiven, you live down the road.
But
What-
essentially it is staff. I mean, we have no authority in that. We have recommendation authority.
You know, the budget
Well, that would
committee
be-
sets the
Council.
budget.
Mhm.
You know, council sets the goals, budget committee sets the budget, and then staff is supposed to execute the goals within that budget. So
Now-
the actual spending is up to staff, you know, there's some checks and balances with council, but every year, you know, you look around this country, you're not gonna see